breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos. Dr. Glenn Harrison, wave and say hi.
Hey, I'm Dr. Harrison.
So today we are going to be talking about a symptom and condition that is really common amongst the general population, and actually it's becoming more common in the medical community too. It actually just recently in the past couple of years gained traction as far as its own diagnosis. And today we are going to be talking about adrenal insufficiency or adrenal fatigue. This is a condition that affects tons and tons of people every year. Some symptoms that you might commonly be familiar with would be low energy in the afternoon, craving sweet, craving salts. You know, you're having difficulty getting your body going in the morning. You have a little bit of brain fog in the morning. So we're going to break it all down for you today. It's going to be awesome. So why don't you get started, man?
Okay.
What is adrenal fatigue?
That was a great intro, Dr. Kolby. Yeah, adrenal fatigue. A little history on it. The natural model always I shouldn't say always, but for decades, they would see somebody that was failing, and the more common symptom out of it was exhaustion. And as they slowly declined, the label was given, adrenal fatigue or chronic fatigue, more adrenal fatigue. And the medical community didn't recognize it. They said that they didn't have a label for it. And then over time, then they gave it a name, but they didn't call it adrenal fatigue. They call it adrenal insufficiency. So that was a medical term for it. And then both communities kind of got on the same page. But the strategies are completely different with both. One, the natural model had a strategy, and the medical model didn't really have a strategy. We'll get into that. But so that's kind of the history behind adrenal fatigue. Some of the people who are listening may have heard of Addison's disease. So Addison's disease is where the adrenal glands get so tired, so exhausted that they're shutting down. They're really not performing at all. They're pretty well done. And that's a serious, serious condition. And that's the medical condition is called Addison's disease. But that adrenal fatigue and adrenal insufficiency are the earlier stages of that before it progressed to Addison's disease. So there's a little bit of a context. You talked about some symptoms, Dr. Kolby. You talked about fatigue, of course, being one. Brain fog, energy crashes, afternoon. I see a lot of people, I know maybe you have, waking up at 3 to 5 in the morning and then sometimes having a hard time to fall asleep. Energy crashes at 3 to 4 in the afternoon is a common thing. I see a lot of sweet cravings, a lot of salt cravings. I've seen infertility. I've even seen hair loss. What else have you seen, Dr. Kolby?
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen all those things too, and I'm actually going to take it just one step further, and I'm going to start by maybe breaking down why we're seeing these things first, right? So your adrenal glands basically breaks down using Latin to ad means above, right? Renal means kidney. So the gland above your kidney, and it's a little triangle-shaped gland that sits above your kidney, and it's responsible for producing all sorts of stuff from cortisol to norepinephrine to sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen, glucocorticoids. All these type of things are made in your adrenal glands. That doesn't mean anything to you guys yet. But these glands are really receptive to stress. So when we look at all these different types of symptoms that we're having, whether it's, cravings in the afternoon for food or, for salt or sugar, where you crash in the afternoon around, 3 p.m. That's where you see the 5-hour energy commercial, right? If you're tired at 3, take 5-hour energy. Waking up at between 3 and 5, all this is because your adrenal glands are responsible for making a lot of the hormones that are responsible for helping us regulate our lives day to day. So for instance, I'll break down the waking up at 3 a.m. one. So when you wake up at 3 a.m. in a lot of cases, your blood sugar levels are not staying stable throughout the night the way that they should, and they crash. When they crash, you get a spike of cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that helps you mobilize blood sugar from sugars that are stored in your liver and in your muscle. So it helps you break down these sugars so that it mobilizes it into your bloodstream so that it can be used by your brain and everything else. When it crashes, you get that cortisol surge, and that actually your melatonin levels and your cortisol levels cross at certain periods throughout the day, and that actually helps you initiate sleep and wake cycles. So when you're waking up earlier, it can mean that that cycle is actually shifted based on the cortisol production in response to like a blood sugar issue. So that's when you look at things like adrenal insufficiency or adrenal fatigue, there's always, not in all cases, but in most cases, there's an underlying cause that is actually causing some of the effects on the adrenal glands. And in this, so for instance, I have a patient that just came in with issues with sleeping. She can't get to sleep. When she gets to sleep, she's not getting restful sleep. She's waking up early. And I actually just did a cortisol saliva panel on her. And that is because when the results came back, it showed that her cortisol and her melatonin rhythm had shifted. So, and that has to do with the sugar levels and her diet.
Yeah, the close relationship between blood sugar and adrenal glands definitely can't be ignored. They're hand in hand. They're like brother and sister. But like you said, the adrenal glands, they do a lot. They produce hormones. One of the major hormones is cortisol, what you're saying. So just to reiterate what you said, just to recap, the adrenal glands feed you, if we want to simplify it, they feed you throughout the night. And they feed you by driving up your cortisol. And your cortisol is one of its main jobs is to drive up blood sugar. So when you're fasting at night, your cortisol should slowly build up through the night. And in the morning, it should be the highest. And at bedtime, it should be the lowest. Cortisol feeds you. So if your cortisol can't feed you blood sugar throughout the night when you're naturally fasting and cortisol drops, well, what happens? You run out of fuel, your brain runs out of blood sugar, and then adrenaline pops up, and adrenaline wakes you up and suppresses hunger. So even though you are low on blood sugar, you don't have a hunger craving because adrenaline shuts that down. So that's why that symptom happens. So cortisol is a key player with regards to blood sugar. And then it plays into then it'll affect our sleep-wake cycles if the adrenal glands are kicking in cortisol at the wrong time and then hampering melatonin. So there's
on top of that too, like you just said, adrenaline also made by the adrenal glands,
mm-hmm.
or norepinephrine.
Yeah. So a lot of hormones like the cortisol, as you mentioned, and we talked about the adrenaline and epinephrine and norepinephrine, and then there's testosterone. So women don't have testosterone producing organs like testes, so they have to rely on the adrenal glands for the majority, if not all, of their testosterone to maintain physique and all of that. And then the adrenal glands make estrogen. Men need some estrogen too, and they don't have estrogen producing glands, so they have to rely on the adrenal glands to create the estrogen testosterone balance. And then another hormone that is oftenly forgotten is DHEA. DHEA really comes to light in females because for females to produce testosterone, the adrenal glands produce some testosterone directly in a female, but the majority of the testosterone in a female comes through DHEA. So adrenal glands make DHEA, and DHEA in turn makes testosterone. When a woman is low on DHEA, one of the first things that'll happen is low libido, low sex drive. It's impossible for a female to have sex drive and any kind of libido functioning if they don't have the DHEA. And then the final symptom that I see, and I know maybe Dr. Kolby you can add to this one, the final symptom that I see is that salt craving I talked about. Well, the adrenal glands make another hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone's claim to fame is to maintain your salt in your body. So if you crave sweets, ask the question why. And everybody likes sweets, but if you need them, the adrenal glands could be part of the story. And if you need salt, and you really, really, really need salt, you could be low on salt. And if you're low on salt, one of the biggest players is the adrenal glands. So when the adrenal glands get tired, you lose the ability to produce cortisol. So your cortisol can be lower, or your cortisol can be delivered at different times throughout the night, like you said, Dr. Kolby, and then it plays with your sleep. Your testosterone levels can be lower in females, and your estrogen levels can be lower in men. And then you can have salt cravings. And then another thing to know, and I'm a bit of a tangent here, but it's very important. I see a lot of women that are going through menopause and they're worried about bone density problems. And then they go to their medical doctor and they want to give them bioidentical hormone replacements with estrogen. Women, if their adrenal glands are working well, they usually don't need any hormone replacement therapies. Ovaries are the big estrogen producing glands, but when after menopause, they don't produce as much estrogen. But that's okay, because the body has a backup system. That's the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are there to deliver estrogen to maintain that bone density. So these little adrenal glands, they do a lot more than energy. I'll let you take it from there, Dr. Kolby.
Right. So a couple of the other ones, when we talk about salt cravings, we talked about aldosterone, right? Aldosterone is a huge player in actually like the thickness of your blood. And it actually helps you maintain like a healthy blood pressure, because the more viscous or thick that a blood is, the harder it is to pump, right? So aldosterone helps you to maintain healthy salt like concentrations. So if you are craving more salt, well, then your aldosterone can be all messed up. As a consequence, you can have elevated blood pressure. You can have issues with filtration because the blood is so thick. I mean, there's a ton of consequences for that side of it. And the other side of it would be when you talked about like the sex hormones. When I look at people, if I have a patient that comes in and they're like, oh man, I'm going through menopause and I have terrible symptoms. I'm getting the sweats. I'm getting, fatigue. I have no sex drive. I look at all these things. If you are in a chronic state of stress, what actually happens is instead of making DHEA, your body will go through a kind of a process called a pregnenolone steal, which is, you guys can Google that. We're not going to go down into that. But basically what it does is it actually takes all those precursors to make DHEA and it pushes those to making cortisol. So when you make cortisol, because it's a stress hormone, you're trying to mobilize blood sugars, all these different things, that can actually increase or exacerbate the levels of symptoms that you are having during menopause.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Thank you for talking about pregnenolone steal. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So also a bit of a tangent with the aldosterone, you talk about blood pressure and all that. That's huge. If you can't make aldosterone or you reduce aldosterone production, you reduce your salt in your body. If you don't have salt in your body or you don't have the hormone, your salt goes out of your urine when you pee. And then what happens is water always follows salt. That's the rule. Water always follows salt. So what will happen is you'll drink water and you'll always be peeing. You're always drinking and you're always peeing because you don't have the salt to hold it in. Some people say, Dr. Harrison, I'm just always peeing. And if another symptom is maybe a low sex drive and another symptom is low energy that's been getting worse and worse and worse, well, I do suspect adrenal fatigue. Now, I guess the next thing we should talk about, Dr. Kolby, is what causes adrenal fatigue? What is the one cause?
I'm going to go with stress, right? What is stress, Dr. Harrison? Every single patient that I've ever had, I think, that comes into my office and they have all X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh man, it sounds like they're having an issue with their adrenals. How's your stress level? Oh, it's crazy. I just opened a new business, had a baby, and my husband's leaving, or whatever. Yeah, I was in a car accident and I got fired from my job, and all of this stress compounds and it builds up. Then all of a sudden they're being driven, their limbic system's being driven. They're based on like a fight or flight model. They're stressed out. Their adrenal glands are pumping out all this cortisol because they're trying to keep you functioning, basically, because you're probably not eating a healthy diet, or you're not, eating the appropriate nutrients. So your adrenals are just sitting there firing this cortisol out all the time. Your sleep patterns get messed up. And it's like this big cyclical pattern where you don't sleep, you don't eat good, you get you get irregular blood sugar levels, you get a cortisol spike. Oh, your blood sugar drops when you're sleeping, cortisol drops, you get an norepinephrine surge. So basically your adrenal glands are just functioning nonstop. So eventually, they can only work for so long. So eventually they wear out, and not wear out, but they just stop functioning at as high a level. And that's when you start seeing complications of this, because they're no longer able to adapt to the stresses that are put on there. So that's one of the big predisposing factors for me in my patients that I've seen with adrenal insufficiency or adrenal fatigue. What about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. When I try to explain adrenal fatigue, adrenal insufficiency, I always say these little adrenal glands, their job is to give you that third or fourth, or hopefully not fifth wind when you're pushing yourself, if you're working more hours or you're dealing with emotional stressors in your life. They help push you through. They help lift you through that stress and keep you going, keep you functioning. And and the adrenal glands are designed to sprint. The way I explain it, they're all about sprinting, meaning short bursts of stress, not long, chronic, never-ending stressors. And again, we talk about stress. I see it with physical stress sometimes, chemical stressors. So if people are dealing with chemical exhaustion or toxicity or leaky gut or even viral infections, if it goes on long enough, it exhausts these little adrenal glands so long where then they give up. So if you're ever, pursuing adrenal fatigue as the problem, it's never the problem. It's always collateral damage where some system in your body is shutting down, or as you talked about, Dr. Kolby, a mountain of stressors that are building up throughout life that your body is trying to handle. These little adrenal glands can't handle it forever, and then they give up, and then now you have the adrenal problem. But it's not the problem, it's collateral damage of another system. I've seen people have thyroid issues where their thyroid is struggling, their body is shutting down, the little adrenal glands jump in to help out, and then they can only do it for so long, and then they shut down. So then you have two problems, and you have a thyroid problem and an adrenal problem, or you have an infection and adrenal problem. So you always got to look for the cause of the adrenal problem. Don't just load up on 1,700 supplements and think you're going to fix it. There's a reason for it. Some of them are obvious, like you said, Dr. Kolby, started a business and had a kid and all of these other things. Well, yeah, that could be, touching on that, there was this lady I was working with, and she came in and fatigue, of course, joint pain, no diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, but it looked like rheumatoid arthritis. Very, very tired. She was just starting a new job, major management position. She had all these medical clinics she was managing. Really exciting, but extremely stressful because there was a merger and all of these things. And she was late 40s, lived a relatively healthy lifestyle from what I saw. And she talked about fatigue. She talked about really dry skin. Well, maybe wink, wink, maybe a hint, maybe a sign of dehydration. And she said, Dr. Harrison, I'm always peeing. I just drink and I'm always peeing. I'm waking up all the time and always peeing. So I'm like, okay. And then she started to talk about the stressors with her son and her work, her new job, and all of these other things. And there was a thyroid issue, but that was being managed. We had to tweak that a little bit, get the MD involved on that one. But and she couldn't sleep. Her sleep patterns were all jacked up, kind of like you're saying. And then as we started to make some changes, introducing structure in her day, she had severe digestive problems, extreme constipation, so digestion. So you get all these systems that are failing because the body is failing, and the brain and everything's shutting down. So all these other organ systems are starting to shut down, which causes more stress on the body. So then these people just slowly start failing. Once that was all managed, her hydration came back, her skin wasn't as dry, her hair started thickening up. She was able to actually work out in the gym. Everything started to turn around for her. But in some people, it can take many months. I've seen people that even take over a year to pull out of chronic adrenal fatigue. So,
and I think you brought up a huge point too, maybe not consciously, but your body is not a group of specific systems. It's not, this is a cardiovascular problem, this is an endocrine problem, this is a digestive problem, this is a neurological problem. Your body is a whole unit. It is a well-oiled machine, and all the parts work together. So you can't necessarily have issues in one area and not think that it's not going to manifest itself in other areas. Actually, one of the signs and symptoms of adrenal insufficiency or adrenal fatigue is actually permeability of gut or overgrowth of the microbiome inside your gut. So then you can get things like SIBO, which we've talked about. Then you can get things like a yeast overgrowth, which we can talk about. I don't know if we have yet, but I mean, it's definitely possible, right? So you can have all of these different factors and someone go, yeah, it's SIBO, no problem, right? Well, is it just SIBO? Is it SIBO and adrenal insufficiency? Is it SIBO adrenal insufficiency and a thyroid condition? Or is it, that's where the art of getting all this stuff working together really comes in, because you've got to really look at the whole body as a unit to figure out what's wrong and try to do what's best for the patient. So if you're having these things, don't just think, oh man, I've got adrenal fatigue, I've got adrenal insufficiency, I got you have to really get help so that you can determine, like,
The why.
it's going to be a multifactorial issue probably, and getting the help that can help you find those factors is going to be totally invaluable to you.
I completely agree. The buzzwords and the buzz diagnoses and the quick fix strategies, they just don't exist. This lady was living on the case I was talking about. She was living on coffee all morning, all afternoon, and evening just to get by. And when you get these stimulants, like you talked about, like the 24-hour energy and all that, whatever that was, and all that crazy stuff. You look in the ingredients; it's just usually sugar, and then they put some B vitamins in there and call it excellent. But we live in a world where there's all these, these energy driving drinks, these stimulants. And if you think of these little adrenal glands, they're like little triangles, or the size of a Cheerio or smaller. And they sit on top of your kidneys, and they're very small, but very powerful and very necessary. When they get tired, they can't deliver that hormone, and your body starts failing. But when you're driving your body, you're jacking yourself up with all these stimulants that everybody is doing, or caffeine all throughout the day. It's like taking those poor little adrenal glands that don't have much hormone left in them, and it's like wringing them out and getting that last bit of hormone. What happens is it just progresses and prolongs that adrenal fatigue. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's the way this lady was. She had all these energy aminos in the afternoon, and she couldn't live without them. And I'll tell you, she thought it was impossible. And I gave her this explanation, wringing out the adrenal glands, and that scared the heck out of her. And we couldn't go off at cold turkey because she still had to function. But now she's having 1/2 of a cup of coffee a day in the morning. That's all she needs. She loves the taste of it. There's benefits to clean coffee, a lot of benefits to it, but she doesn't need it as a crutch anymore. So,
yeah, she's not artificially propping herself up anymore, which is a total win, right?
Exactly. And her body will continuously restore. Another thing is, and I just want to add this, a little bit of my personal story. Adrenal fatigue, or the adrenal glands make a hormone called, the one we talk about, the major one is cortisol, and cortisol's main job is to drive blood sugar. When I was going through school, due to a lot of stress and physical stress and, emotional stress and sleep deprivation and everything else under the sun, financial stress. Dr. Kolby, who studied with you, you understand, you had front row seats to it all. You were right there. Yeah. Some of us managed it. Some of us managed it better than others, and I didn't manage it very well. And what happened is, through the stress response, my cortisol levels were probably red line. I don't know. I wasn't testing them all the time, but I was shaking and sweating all the time. And when we were doing our blood sugar testing and the other lipid testing and all the other blood testing first year, I turned into a pre-diabetic, and that was mostly on the account of cortisol. Second year, I just kept doing what I was doing, and I turned into a full-blown type 2 diabetic. I'm not that anymore. Made changes, and it took time and caught it early. But I guess the purpose of that story is cortisol alone can get people's blood sugar high enough in these stressors that it can put you over the edge and put you into a diabetic state, a pre-diabetic all the time. So be careful with it. We need it, but you can push them too far.
Absolutely. So a lot of you guys are probably having questions about, like, if I suspect that I have, adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency, what can I do? There's a couple options. Routine blood work is really a totally invaluable tool. You can do saliva tests to check for cortisol. There's a lot of options. I think that the biggest thing is to find someone who's qualified, or if you guys want, you can contact us. And we'd be more than happy to help facilitate that. So in wrapping it up, if you want to get a hold of me, you can get on our website. Our website is www.northlakeschiropractic.com. Or you can get on our Facebook, which is North Lakes Chiropractic and Functional Neurology. Dr. Glenn, yours is DRG Harrison at...
Almost. Yeah, www.drgharrison.com. Or you can just Google the Center of Functional Medicine, Denver, and you'll find us. A lot of information on there on adrenal fatigue and everything else. But the biggest thing is, if you are exhausted and you've got brain fog and any of those symptoms, do not let them go. Do not put them off. Don't do what I've done in school, because all sorts of trauma can happen to the body. Shut that stuff down right away. because one thing, that energy usually doesn't get better with age, right? So whatever age you are, if you're feeling less, having less energy, it's only going to get worse. You want to preserve that. I think that's extremely important.
So our big thing is be proactive, not reactive, right? So
yeah, I love that.
If you're having these things, please do not wait. Reach out, and we'll do our absolute best to help you out. So as always, thanks for watching. If you got value from this content, please share it with the ones you love or anyone else you feel that might get value out of it. And stay tuned, because we'll come up with something else for the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kolby.
Yeah, until next time, man. Have a good week.
Thank you.